Aloha, I'm CM Monteleone, mamstrong808.com, and I'm here today at Punakea Palms Farm. It's a coconut farm here with Kai, and he's going to talk about one of my favorite things, coconuts.
Aloha guys, welcome. Thank you for coming to the farm today. My name is Kai McPhee. I grew up here in Lahaina. In Lahaina, we are pretty much surrounded by coconut trees in every direction. So growing up, this has just been a very iconic site, having coconut trees everywhere. Unfortunately, I didn't really have a strong connection to the plant throughout my life and had very little access to coconuts. But my dad planted this farm about 14 years ago, and since then I've just been a part of watching these trees grow and become very inspired by this plant, and really love today now being able to share this farm with all the visitors that come by and our community as well.
Thank you so much. Okay, so what kind of species of palms do you have here? Because as I understand, there are several different types of coconut palms.
Yeah, well, the word palm kind of encompasses a lot of different plants. There are thousands of different varieties, I believe thousands of palms, and a lot of different types of palms grow here in Hawaii. On our property we have Manila palms and foxtail palms and royal palms and sago palms and Mexican fan palms. But what we focus on kind of in the commercial aspect of it is the coconut palm, and the coconut palm is by far the most iconic of the palms here in Hawaii for sure, and definitely the most valuable species of palm to human beings. And it's a plant that people on our planet that coexist with this plant have always had a very deep connection to it. And in almost every culture around the world where coconut trees grow, they refer to this plant as the tree of life. And here in Hawaiian culture, they call this tree Kumu Nui, and Kumu Nui means the great source. So it's been a very integral part of Hawaiian culture, kind of a cornerstone of everyday life. Every part of the tree is highly valuable. And it still is today. Unfortunately, we've just kind of lost touch with that. And I've had an incredible experience reconnecting with this plant and just rediscovering all those valuable resources that it has. Okay, so we're down here in the coconut grove, and all of this land here that we're on here in Lanipoco, as far as you can see in both directions, this was commercial sugarcane fields for over 120 years. And that was a really hard use of this land. So with conventional farming, they were using big machinery here, driving back and forth on this soil, compacting it into really, really hard, dense, almost concrete. They were spraying a lot of chemicals back in those days as well, for decades and decades, which have just been leaching into the ground. And they also grew the same crop here in the same spot for over 100 years. And so sugarcane was pulling specific nutrients out of the ground that were specific to sugarcane. And they would harvest and remove all that sugarcane, and then they'd plant sugarcane again. So it's kind of strip mining specific resources out of the ground that were never really replenished. So when we planted our farm here, we're starting in very poor conditions. And back then we didn't know a lot about soil health or microbiology. And so we never really addressed the health issues of the soil. But I was really inspired by a method called natural farming, which sounds like a generic term. It kind of is. But what natural farming focuses on is two things. The first is trying to emulate the natural environment of whatever type of plant you're trying to grow. So here we've got a coconut grove, and luckily in nature, coconuts grow in a grove just like this. This is a pretty natural setting to find them growing. Of course, they won't be in perfect rows like this, and they won't all be the exact same height because these were all planted at the same time. But this is a pretty natural spacing for them. This is about as close as they will grow together in nature. And in nature, a coconut grove like this, it's pulling lots of resources out of the ground. Coconut trees are pulling tons of nutrients and minerals and, of of course, moisture out of the ground, and you're using those to grow fronds and coconuts. And in nature, all of those things fall right back to the ground at the base of the tree, and they return to the soil. Coconut grove like this is a closed system. It's net neutral. Nothing really leaves that system. So it's self-sufficient. What we're doing now is trying to, again, just emulate that system. Everything that comes out of these trees gets shredded up, put right back onto the ground around the trees. That's why it looks like a big mess around here, but I promise you that's intentional. But that's just the first part of the process. All of that organic material on the ground is not accessible by the trees until it is converted by microbiology. Beneficial funguses and beneficial bacteria, which compost that organic material and make it available. In fact, the fungal root systems in the soil, the mycelium, they spoon feed all those nutrients to the roots of the plants.
Wow, that's fascinating.
And from what I know, very similar to the way that we as humans are able to get nutrients from our food. We really depend on those probiotics in our stomachs to do that process for us. So plants, excuse me, plants really rely on that symbiotic relationship. And if they are displaced or devoid in the soil from either compaction or chemicals, then your plant has no ability to feed unless you are synthetically feeding it through chemical fertilizers and other things. But it's a really inefficient way to grow a plant. Coconut trees are one of the highest evolved plants on our planet. They've been around for tens of millions of years.
And they're prehistoric.
Yeah.
Considered prehistoric.
And so for tens of millions of years, they have been navigating a very specific system, and that is the natural system of our planet. So they become very efficient at living in that natural world. So if you change anything about that natural system, automatically the plant is going to lose efficiency and it's going to lose health. So the good thing about natural farming is it's very easy, it's very cheap, it uses a lot less physical and labor resources, and the results are outstanding. So about 3 years ago, since we went to this method, our farm has responded incredibly well. And this the transformation that I've been able to witness has been the most inspiring and rewarding experience of my whole life.
Great.
Yeah. So one of the most, I think, fascinating concepts when thinking about coconut trees and how they grow is how they have been propagating around our planet for millions and millions of years. Like I said before, coconut trees are one of the most highly evolved plants on our planet. They've been on our planet for, I've heard estimates of around 50 million years. In that time, they've been very successful on our planet. And the fact that we still have billions of coconut trees covering our planet today is a testament to how successful their design is. And the way that a coconut tree propagates around our planet is pretty unique. You can think of a coconut as essentially the seed of a coconut tree. It's the only way that a coconut tree can sprout and grow. It's from a single coconut. And so the way that most plants and other trees spread their seeds around our planet is either blowing in the wind or getting pooped out of a bird. Coconuts don't fit into birds very well, and they don't blow very far in the wind. So the way they move around our planet naturally is by falling out of a coconut tree and bouncing and rolling 20 feet away on the ground. Usually that doesn't roll uphill, so this is why you typically only see coconut trees right along the coastlines, down on the sea level. The other way is if that coconut rolls down the beach and finds its way into the ocean. And in the ocean, a coconut can float extremely well. It can float for months at a time. It can travel thousands of miles in that time, until it eventually, potentially, might wash up onto a distant shoreline somewhere. And in that location, can set roots and sprout and grow into another coconut tree. And this is essentially how coconuts have spread across vast areas of our planet. And the coconut has been very, very effective at spreading itself around our planet. They can only grow in a warm tropical environment, but that doesn't keep them from washing ashore in areas well outside of where they would be able to sprout and grow.
Thanks. Okay, so what are some of the health benefits that you're aware of just through your experience farming of the coconut? And is coconut actually a nut? We didn't even get to that.
That's a good question. Coconut is technically not a nut. It's also not a fruit. It's not classified as a seed. Scientifically, I think. It's classified as a drupe. And drupe is spelled D-R-U-P-E. The interesting thing about coconuts, unlike a typical fruit where you would pick it at its peak ripeness and that's its maximum value, coconuts can be harvested at many different stages throughout their development. And depending on when you harvest them, you will experience dramatic changes in their flavors and their textures, and the health benefits and the uses. Typically, young coconuts in the 6 to 8 or 9 month age range are harvested from the coconut tree, and most desirable for their fresh drinking water inside, coconut water. Most people are pretty familiar with it. It's a pretty big industry today. And coconut water is very beneficial for human consumption. It's full of nutrients.
I think I read somewhere that in World War II they used coconut water as an IV in the hospital.
Yeah, it's true, and that's because inside the coconut is a sterile environment. So there is really no permeation or access to the outside air. So it's sterile in there, and it is full of nutrients and minerals and vitamins, tons of electrolytes.
And are they getting these minerals from the mulch that it creates itself that you were talking about earlier?
Yeah, the tree pulls all of its resources from the soil. And it concentrates those into this drupe. I like to think of it as a seed, and storing those like a battery for potentially a long trip across the ocean, or waiting to find itself in a viable location to sprout and grow into another tree.
Fascinating. Okay, great. And one of my favorite things about the coconut is that it contains something called lauric acid. And lauric acid converts to monolaurin, which is really only in a handful of things. That would be coconuts, palm kernel, not to be confused with palm oil, because palm itself actually has very little lauric acid, but palm kernel particularly has lauric acid. Also, the leaf of the bay tree, you might just know them as bay leaves that you throw into soup. And one more thing, that's breast milk. So if you don't have any breast milk handy, then the coconut is one of my favorite ways to get this monolaurin. And the monolaurin is really important because it's antimicrobial and antibacterial. It kills staph, it kills E. coli, a lot of the bad pathogens in your gut. So I love the coconut for its monolaurin lauric acid content. So the thing about the monolaurin that was fascinating to me is the fact that staph has become so resistant because of the overuse of antibiotics and the use of antibiotics in our food, the use of antifungals in our food. Again, that's why it's fascinating to me that the mulch, so to speak, that the coconut palm itself creates has all of these nutrients that are antifungal and antimicrobial. So when you ingest the coconut, whether it's in the oil, because it's mostly in the fat is where the monolaurin or the lauric acid is, when you ingest the fats, you're getting this component that actually has been shown in research studies to kill staph. One of the things people don't realize is that they may actually have an overgrowth of staph and not really know it. One of the things it does is it settles in your joints. So this paper I'm working on right now talks about how non-traumatic joint pain is usually actually bacteria that's settled in your joints. So if someone's really kind of achy, or if they have tendon problems, specifically for me, I'm fascinated for runners that have Achilles problems. They have found that the muscle tissue of Achilles tendons that have ruptured with spontaneous rupture are full of staph, and the healthy tendons don't have staph at all in them. So that led me to think, okay, well, what kills staph? And there's all these different resistant staphs that, I love the fact that the coconut has this monolaurin that kills staph. So I always have my clients ingest the coconut oil so that they can use it as a precaution to this bacteria settling.
So, from what I know about the fat, or directly the oil that comes from the coconut, is that it's about 50% lauric acid and the other 50% saturated fat in the form of medium chain triglycerides.
Right, so that's actually gotten kind of a bad rap because up until the 1960s, coconut oil was our major oil that we used. And then around the 1960s, the various, won't say the government specifically, but soybean oil was promoted, and that became the leading oil. We had the American Heart Association that also didn't want people to ingest coconut oil because of the saturated fat. But we know a lot more today about that, and we know that medium chain triglycerides are actually one of the few that can cross the blood-brain barrier. Our brain is composed of a lot of fat, so we need the fats. A lot of times the fats can't cross that barrier, but with the MCT, they can. Open Heart Magazine came out with an article that was talking about the benefits of the MCTs. So for your heart, for your cardiovascular health, it actually had a very positive effect on cholesterol. While it did raise overall cholesterol, it raised the good cholesterol and lowered the bad cholesterol. It also had such an effect on insulin in this research article that it lowered your blood sugar, and therefore it was created a better environment so that you weren't obese. Obesity causes a higher chance of heart disease, of course. So the medium chain triglycerides actually have been shown recently to benefit the heart. So all the previous information that they thought is now being reversed. I think we kind of, knew that all along, but we're steered in a little bit of a wrong direction. So a lot of research, again, by the heart community itself, saying that the MCTs, specifically in coconut oil, have positive effects on the heart and on obesity.
I also like to think about a lot of the cultures around the world that have been depending on coconut as their primary source of dietary fat for thousands of years. Places like Southeast Asia and the South Pacific, southern India, and a lot of these places have some of the lowest rates of heart disease and cholesterol issues and other things.
Right. And again, with cholesterol, it was previously thought that high cholesterol was bad across the board.
Mm-hmm.
But now doctors, they do check the different types of cholesterol, and having a higher good cholesterol usually translates into having a better health record.
Yeah, so when I first started putting attention into this farm, it was very clear that the soil had really, really deep health issues. And I think the biggest issue it had was the displacement of the beneficial microorganisms, those funguses and bacteria. So I was introduced to a concept in the natural farming world from Korea called Korean natural farming. And what I liked about it was that it was a really simple approach to reintroducing those microorganisms. So specifically the method that I was using is called Jadam, and I was just collecting what is called indigenous microorganisms. Indigenous being the ones that you find on your property, because those are the ones that are the strongest for you to use. They have outcompeted and proven themselves to be the strongest for your specific spot on the planet, your altitude and climate and moisture content. So you really want to use those. So I'll go collect those in several different places around the farm. A big key to this is diversity, and the diversity is what creates balance. If you've got a fungal infection or some other kind of malady, a lot of times it's because you have an imbalance of microorganisms. This avocado tree behind us, for 10 years, had this black fungal infection all over the bark of the tree. It never produced a single avocado. It rarely had more than 4 or 5 leaves on the tree. And conventional, I guess, approach would be to go by a fungicide and kill that fungus, which you could do. You could kill that fungus, and hopefully it wouldn't reemerge.
Sounds a lot like antibiotics.
That's right. But what I did was I gathered a large diversity of funguses and bacteria from around our farm. I cultivate them in a large barrel of water, kind of like making a kombucha brew. You feed them with a starch, and overnight, here in this warm weather that we have, that whole 50 gallons of water, you've turned millions and millions of individual funguses and bacteria into trillions and trillions.
Wow.
The whole batch is alive. In our farm, I just inoculate our soil with that. They swim down into the soil. They start unlocking all the organic material and releasing the nutrients to the plants. They're also chased into the soil by large organisms, nematodes, worms, bugs, beetles that feed on them. Those are like little mini tractors digging into the ground, decompacting the soil, allowing oxygen and moisture to penetrate deeper and deeper. And the goal is really to just restore what would be a natural environment.
So it almost sounds like in our body restoring the probiotics as opposed to killing all the bacteria with an antibiotic. So
That's right.
Sounds familiar. And I see your avocado tree is doing very well.
It's doing great.
Absolutely full.
It's doing great. So I just sprayed those microorganisms on that tree, and what it didn't do was kill that fungal infection. But what it did do was it displaced it. It took all the resources away from it and created a natural balance again.
Wow.
And you had on a micro scale, just a competition for resources, and it restored a natural balance.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for having us here at the farm today. You've provided a wealth of information, and I know it's only a little bit of the tip of the iceberg because Kai gives a 2-hour tour. So if y'all are interested in learning more about coconuts and about his farm, there is plenty more to learn. But I just want to say thank you so much for having us today.
It's my pleasure. I particularly appreciate having members of our community come up and see this farm. Because again, we live in a community where we are surrounded in every direction by coconut trees. And unfortunately, we're just not utilizing this incredible resource that we have. So what I'm selling up here at our farm is just information and hopefully inspiration. To go home and start using the coconut, making coconut milk at home. It's so easy. If you want to learn how, come up to the farm. We teach you every single day. Thanks again for coming.
Thank you. And I'm here today at Punakea Farms. Oh my gosh, I already messed it up.
Punakea Palms.
Punakea Palms.
Regenerate or
That's okay, we'll edit. Reseeds? No. Wait, it's right? That's a
propagates?
good question.
No, it's a word I use every single day. I'm just blanking out.